you very much. The chair now recognizes Mr. Scalise for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Walensky, we had recently interviewed Dr. Henry Walk. He's CDC's director for the Center of Preparedness and Response over in your office. You know Mr. Walk, don't you?
Dr. Walk, yes, I do, very well.
Yeah. Do you respect Dr. Walk's opinion on the job he does?
Dr. Walk has a great amount of integrity and he has my deepest respect.
I asked because we asked him a number of questions about something that we also asked you about, and that relates to the changes that were made to CDC's guidance right before they were about to come out on school reopenings as it relates to the teachers union making major edits to the CDC guidance. And I know when we had asked you about it, you said, quote, "It is CDC's customary practice to engage with stakeholders," which we thought wasn't necessarily what we've seen in the past. So we asked Dr. Walk. And some of the things he said is, quote, that it was uncommon for the CDC to share draft guidance documents to outside partners. He also said that CDC, even if they did release a draft guidance, it would be embargoed, quote, several hours before publication. Yet, Dr. Walensky, you shared school guidance with the CDC 12 days before publication. And there's a trail of emails going back long before the guidance came out between you and the head of the union talking about changes they wanted that ultimately got incorporated almost verbatim. So first, is it uncommon or is it not uncommon to allow an outside partner like a teachers union who's trying to keep schools shut to edit the documents when the CDC guidance was initially going to give more credence to opening schools, and you changed it on their behest to, in essence, give them a better opportunity to keep schools closed? So is Dr. Walk right in that it's uncommon, or your comments that it is common the right statement?
So thank you, Ranking Member. Let me just say, first of all, I was not in the room to understand the full context of Dr. Walk's testimony, but let me tell you what I know about the conversation that the discussion that I'd like to have. First, these were discussions that happened in the beginning of February of 2021, days after I entered into this position. Why was it days? Because getting our schools open was critically important. At the time, we had 46% of our schools open for in-person learning. And I think we would all agree that we had real challenges with our children being home, the social educational milestones that were being lost. We needed to get our schools open. We, in that context, engaged, as we often do, with organizations and groups that are impacted by our guidance and our recommendations at the agency. And we do that to ensure that they can be—
Let me ask you this, Dr. Walensky. Did you engage with any parents groups?
We did. In fact, we did. I personally did. So I can tell you that our draft guidance was shared with over 50 organizations and stakeholders, boards of education, superintendents, national associations of schools, nurses, all of this with the mission of getting our children back to school.
Can you provide the details on all the groups that you consulted with? And then specifically, can you provide which groups actually gave you recommendations that you incorporated? Because when we look at the request from the teachers union specifically, they sent you language on the left. They sent you this language because they were concerned your language might not make it easy enough for them to close schools. When we're trying to get Dr. Fauci, hold on, Dr. Fauci testified in our committee almost a year ago, but he testified schools should be open. So clearly there's strong science that the schools should be open. The unions wanted to close them. This is the changed language after they sent you this by email, not where teacher groups or parent groups were able to give input that I've seen. They sent you this change. This is what your new document showed, literally almost verbatim language. And I don't know if you put a footnote, if somebody gives you language, when I took English, put a footnote that they gave you the language, but who else was able to give this kind of guidance to you that you then took almost verbatim and changed your report?
So we, as I mentioned, engaged with over 50 organizations and stakeholders. We do those engagements so we can bring in the feedback. We take that feedback and we consider it, and we ultimately implement things that are consistent with our scientific underpinnings.
So would you get
our
us
guidance. When we
all the
spoke-
groups that gave you input and whose input you allowed into your document? Like, clearly the unions were one of those groups that got to change the science based
There
on
was
what.
not science that was changed. There was an omission. And if I could speak to the omission
omission?
was that in our draft guidance, we did not reflect on what should happen with immunocompromised teachers. If teachers were undergoing cancer chemotherapy, if they were on immunomodulating agents, there was nothing in the guidance to reflect what we should do in that situation.
This doesn't talk about chemotherapy. This makes it easier to close schools. And in fact, they thank you for including it because they said it makes it easier to close schools. So can you
That's a
give me
reflection
any
of the
other
guidance.
group? Would you give me the
That's
details of any other group that gave you changes that you incorporated?
Provide that, but let me just note, as a reflection of what happened after that guidance, 46% of schools were closed before, 60% or 46% of schools were open before that guidance, 60% just a few months after. Those guidances open schools. I publicly said, even in the absence of vaccination, our schools should be open even in the absence of vaccination. And in fact, just this past year and fall of 2021, with a Delta surge ongoing, we had over 99% of our schools open. All
And
of
Mr.
this
Chairman-
was a pathway to get our schools open.
All right, I'll look forward to getting that information from you, Mr. Chairman. I would reiterate, if we can get Dr. Fauci to come testify before the committee. He said he wants to, but he said he can't do it unless you ask him. So I would ask if you would ask Dr. Fauci to come and testify.
We'll give every consideration to accommodating your request.